That's the most difficult part that South African expats and the non-residents will actually face. Now, remember, salaries end on a month-to-month
Bases,
basis,
correct, yeah.
and even if the AIT is valid for 12 months, it doesn't really matter because you cannot apply for funds in advance.
Sure.
You can only apply where you can prove that you have the funds.
Mm.
Now, that would then mean one would have to now apply for an AIT every month to get those funds transferred abroad, of which, I mean, we all know it takes longer, possibly longer than a month to actually obtain the AIT. And in that moment, you're still waiting to transfer your funds. And then you are into another month where now you still have to apply for another AIT. So that's the most difficult part of
Yeah.
these changes that the South African experts and non-residents will face.
A very warm welcome to all listeners and viewers to today's podcast, where we will be featuring Lovemore Ndlovu, who is the head of SARB engagement and expatriate tax compliance at Tax Consulting. Now, Lovemore today will be helping us unpack and understand the new amendments made by the Reserve Bank at the end of October 2025. Now, without further ado, welcome Lovemore.
Hi, Mbali. How are you? And greetings, listeners and viewers. It is good to be here again, taking tax and transfer of funds.
Amazing. Now, without any further ado, I know you did release an article recently which featured in Daily Investors as well as other media houses. Maybe if you can just briefly explain what are the main objectives of this new amendments?
Yeah, so the main objective around this is compliance. This is basically where SARS and the Reserve Bank are trying to align and make sure that in any transfer of funds, compliance is still adhered to. The changes, however, were made further to other types of funds that were actually a little bit reluctant in terms of compliances. Now they're getting a little bit stricter just to make sure that compliance is still adhered to across all transfers.
Okay. So before we get into what are these type of incomes and funds, who is mostly affected by these changes and amendments and why?
Yeah, so the most affected are non-residents as well as the South African expatriates that have ceased their tax residence. Now, this is now where they have to now seek approval for every transfer of funds that they have to transfer abroad from South Africa.
Sure.
Now, there was a bit of a lenience in some types of funds, as you mentioned. However, now it seems like the umbrella is going wider and bigger in terms of compliance and approvals required.
Okay. No, it is seeming as though SARS is trying to become more stricter so that if those people who are non-compliant, they can catch them out. Now, how do these new amendments align with SARS as well as SARB? And what does that mean for taxpayers, non-resident taxpayers?
Yeah, so this means a bit of more admin work, a little of more stringent hoops to go through in terms of the transfers. That would then mean some delays as well in terms of getting the monies across for these particular types of taxpayers.
Mm.
And I mean, in the same sense, SARS is not saying we're not refusing to get these funds transferred abroad, but we need you to comply and get all these approvals before the funds are actually sent abroad.
Yeah, and I would imagine part of that compliance check would be if you are actually living abroad, that you actually have the SARS non-resident confirmation letter.
Correct. So those that have South African experts that are living abroad, one of the requirements now is you need to be confirmed as a non-tax resident. And for the non-residents, which is mainly foreign nationals that are
Yeah.
living and working, or they once lived and worked in South Africa, they also fall under the same bracket where now there is a bit of strictness in terms of moving the funds across from South Africa to wherever they are or back to their home countries.
Yeah. Now, to circle back to the type of funds, obviously, we understand that now they've kind of made the umbrella more wider as to what types of funds need an AIT. Can you just maybe elaborate on these amendments? What type of funds does this now include?
So this includes mainly income type of funds.
Okay.
Now, this is basically any salaries or income still earned from employment left in South Africa,
Sure.
pension and retirement funds, directors' fees, rental incomes, even including distributions from trust and inheritance. All those, they were under the section where SARS and the Reserve Bank were a little bit reluctant in terms of compliance and approvals to get the funds transferred abroad. However, now that's where now the change has been actually implemented to say you now need to get or seek approval from SARS, and then so the Reserve Bank under the banks should also make sure that they check all the compliances before these funds are transferred abroad.
Sure. Now, this does baffle me a little bit because obviously with the AIT, when you obtain it and you apply for it, there is an expiration date. I mean, it is valid for 12 months. So does that even factor in anything now? Because obviously if I'm receiving a salary rather in South Africa, does it even matter if it's valid for 12 months?
That's the most difficult part that South African expats and the non-residents will actually face. Now, remember, a salary is earned on a month-to-month
Basis,
basis,
correct, yeah.
and even if the AIT is valid for 12 months, it doesn't really matter because you cannot apply for funds in advance.
Sure.
You can only apply where you can prove that you have the funds. Now, that would then mean one would have to now apply for an AIT every month to get those funds transferred abroad, of which, I mean, we all know it takes longer, possibly longer than a month to actually obtain the AIT. And in that moment, you're still waiting to transfer your funds. And then you are into another month where now you still have to apply for another AIT. So that's the most difficult part of
Yeah.
these changes that the South African experts and non-residents will face.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that they will change it because if in actuality, if you think about it, does not necessarily make sense, but we'll see how that plays out. Now, in terms of documentation, we've touched on obviously if you're non-resident and you haven't formalized it, it's very important to formally actually do the whole process of the Ravel one and actually obtain a SARS non-resident confirmation letter. Now, when it comes to the AIT, what documentation is required? Has it now changed from what we know it to be, or are there new amendments and changes to the documentation?
Luckily, on that part, they have not changed any requirements.
Okay.
However, there seem to be now additional documents at the point of now requesting or seeking that transfer through your financial institution. Now, there is additional documents that are not part of the application to SARS to request for the AIT. Like, for example, the pension and retirement funds, they now require that the banks check to make sure that that particular retirement or pension that was withdrawn has actually been reported to SARS under the IRP5, or if not yet, it's all now recorded on the IT3A, which means it's gonna be declared to SARS in the next coming tax return. And those should be also reported under particular codes.
Sure.
So they've got a selected particular codes that should reflect as a reporting to SARS based on the requirement that they now seek, which becomes a little bit difficult. I mean, banks are not tax specialists, but they are now forced to actually review tax documents to make sure that they align.
Yes, I was actually about to touch on that the process itself sounds more complex, that I don't think a lay person would be able to actually facilitate this by themselves, especially given salaries. If you're trying to apply for a salary, it might become very tedious, one, and very difficult. Um, but what is the role of the AIT TCS PIN and the manual letter of compliance under the new amendments?
So starting off with the AIT. So the AIT, it's basically plays the same role as it has been in that is just approval for transfer of the funds. Now, the new document that is now introduced and being emphasized on is the manual letter of compliance.
Yes.
They are now looking at those that are no longer in the SARS system or registered with SARS. Now they need to now seek that manual letter of compliance for transfer of funds, which historically or with the experience that I have, it takes longer than even the AIT to be issued by SARS. And Now you get someone who wants to transfer funds probably under some agents, and now they have to seek this document from SARS, which may take over a month or so. Then that delay will always be there for these particular people that are seeking to transfer these funds.
Sure. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, what I am seeing that obviously with a manual letter of compliance, it's more for people who are no longer in the system. And we find that those are typically pensioners who actually receive living annuities. Now, how does one go about it? Especially, I mean, they're old for one and they don't know how to navigate. What does this mean for them? Like, how does it the challenges, how do they overcome and avoid the delay in receiving this manual letter of compliance?
I think SARS has also probably on their side in terms of experience. They have noted that there's quite a lot of old pensioners that are actually living abroad who no longer have their SARS numbers or registered with SARS. And they're trying now to get to those to just make sure that there is compliance before the funds are allowed to move out. But I would rather say where one had a tax number before, because
Mm.
obviously they must have had a tax number before for them to actually invest in those type of funds. Now, it would rather be advisable that they activate those tax numbers, seek the non-resident letter, and go through the AIT route. The manual letter of compliance is a pain. It takes very long to be issued compared to the AIT. And also going through the route of the AIT also ensures that they are officially noted as non-residents
Mm.
by SARS and protecting their foreign end income. I mean, they are living abroad, but typically they are saying they're not coming back. If you are now retired and living abroad, most likely you're not coming back. So it's rather better that you go through the cessation of tax residence and then you get to an AIT and transfer your funds.
Yeah.
Than going through the route of the manual letter of compliance, it takes longer from experience.
So what I'm hearing you is better to get an AIT than the actual MLC.
Correct.
But I mean, just to go back to that point, I mean, it does take long, yes, correct. But what about those that have non-active tax numbers? Now it's an additional step where they actually have to activate their tax number, have an appointment with SARS, then get the non-res letter.
I think as a once-off step at
Mm.
that point, it may be far advantageous than having to do a manual letter of compliance
Yeah.
every month, where it takes probably longer than a month each
Mm.
time you apply,
Mm.
compared to an AIT. An AIT, the easier part of it is there is ways of checking up with SARS and following up, whereas the manual letter of compliance, they don't really have a turnaround time to say it will be issued at this date.
Sure.
And remember, we all know with the fact that you have to email SARS to say, please issue me with this.
Mm.
I mean, we all know emails takes longer to be responded to by SARS. So that's the comparison of the two processes, feeling like the AIT is far better to follow through as compared to the manual letter of compliance.
Sure. No, very insightful. Thanks, Lovemore. Now, lastly, what would you say are the broader implications that these changes might have on compliance, behavior, and offshore remittance for non-resident taxpayers?
I think already having seen a bit of a pushback in terms of clients saying this is impossible. I mean, it's visibly impossible to say someone has to apply for an AIT or a manual letter of compliance every month
Yeah.
to transfer, for example, salaries or directors' fees or inheritance or any type of an income, especially those that are recurring.
Yes.
It's kind of like going to be a very big or huge burden for these type of tax players. I
Mm.
mean, at the end of the day, if something becomes a little bit difficult, people usually by default they will try to find ways around this.
Yeah, easier.
Now, yeah, so the easy route taking would be there, and we may see a little bit of non-compliance here and there where now taxpayers are trying to find a way of getting the funds than just going through all these compliances and then just be delayed every time they want to transfer.
Yeah. No, not understood. Well, as you guys have heard, it is getting more stricter. SARS is getting more stricter. Now we're seeing it move to the AIT as well. So it is very, very prudent for one to seek professional help where you get it right the first time. And people like Lovemore, who are very, skilled in this, they've seen the process move from the first implementation to what it is now. It would be advisable to get in touch with a professional like Lovemore to assist with these, complex transfers, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last words on your side, Lovemore?
Yeah, no, you are quite right, Mali. It's not an easy task to just say, "Well, I'll contact SARS and get this letter." Unfortunately, that's not how it is. It sounds like that. It seems like that, and I normally see it with a lot of clients that I deal with, where they be like, "Well, it seems like I just have to contact SARS and
Yeah.
request for this, and then they have to issue." They don't have to issue. They need to follow through their requirements and make sure that they are satisfied. And once they are, then they can issue whatever document you are requesting for. But as you say, it's far better that you consult and get guidance so that you get it at first time and avoid unnecessary audits that may actually unearth some unnecessary issues for you. So rather avoid opening a can of worms and just get our guidance and get through it as smooth as possible.
No, amazing. Thank you so much, Lovemore. It's been a great pleasure having you and having great insights. I'm very interested to see how it's actually going to play out in reality. Hopefully, there will be amendments to make it more easy. But thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure again.
Thank you.